The TTRPG industry is in a bit of flux at the moment, and it's fair to say it's changing a lot of things that we thought of as staples. I mean, the main consistent core RPG that has dominated the fantasy genre this entire time has been Dungeons and Dragons. There's been a couple of moments of flux when things like Pathfinder have risen up, but since the rise of 5th edition, it has been the mainstay, the go-to game for anyone who's looking to play fantasy TTRPGs. And that's great, but it comes with some problems. Because of its tight control over the fantasy genre, there's so few other people who can realize the full depth of other games there are out there to play. There's so many people I've met who've played D&D for years and years and years and never try any other systems. But it seems that that's about to change. We're now seeing 2 games that are pushing at that spot. Draw Steel by Matt Colville, a heroic, epic, heavy combat-focused game, and the game that we're going to be discussing today, which is Daggerheart. Let's get into it. Welcome to Badger Tales, the home of storytellers. In this series, we're going to do reviews on some of the games that you know very well, and some of the new ones that are peeking our heads around the corner. We're going to try and introduce you to some games that you've maybe never played before, and get you to see some of the indie games beneath the surface. A couple of things about us before we get going. So, at Badger Tales, we focus on homebrew games, storytelling-driven games, and narrative-focused games, which means we will generally lean towards a preference to those kinds of games. That's important to bear in mind when you watch these reviews, so that you understand that we, of course, have that unconscious bias. We like the games which give you control, let you make them your own, and really give you the tools to tell epic stories. We're not so keen on the nitty-gritty mechanics of combat, etc. So if you're looking for that, you might find that we don't connect with those kinds of games as well. That's not to say that you don't get something off those reviews. We'll always try to look into the positivities of every game we come across, so you can get a really good vision of what it does well, what it does badly, and most importantly, if it's right for you. There's so much room for storytellers to tell their stories in a variety of other games, and we want to encourage storytellers to find the game that suits them most. My name is Felix Twingren. I am the CEO and owner of Badger Tales, and I am also a long-time, forever game master and storyteller. I have ran games professionally for over 10 years, and I have played in a variety of systems from Dungeons and Dragons to City of Mist, one of my all-time favorite games, and many, 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 many more. Also, a couple more things before we dive into things properly. This review is not going to cover an in-depth breakdown of the rules. There simply isn't enough time to cover that and get us to grips with whether the game fits you and feels right for you. We will have future videos that go into more depth about exactly how to run these kinds of games, what our advice is as storytellers, how to bring that element to it, and also just guides on the mechanics and how to run those mechanics. We'll touch on the mechanics, we'll give you a good idea of how they work, but we're not going to do full in-depth rulings. The other thing as well to bear in mind is that we only ever review games that we have run at least 2 campaigns in. So, with Daggerheart, that is absolutely the case. We have run 3 campaigns in Daggerheart, 2 of which were run by me, and 1 which was run by another GM. These campaigns ranged from a futuristic sci-fi adventure, sort of Guardians of the Galaxy-esque, a post-apocalyptic Ireland mythology campaign, which I ran in my homebrew setting, which went fantastically well, and finally a more typical fantasy, high seas pirate adventure. All of these worked very well in Daggerheart. So, with that out of the way, what is Daggerheart, and why is it moving so heavily in the scene at the moment? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. The biggest one is that this game was designed by Darrington Press and the folks behind Critical Role. The behemoth that has become Critical Role, which is dominating the TTRPG space, has obviously got a huge amount of weight behind it, and that has propelled this game heavily into the limelight. More people are playing and trying Daggerheart than most other new games that are coming out. In fact, it sold out almost immediately upon its release. That's a good positive thing if you're looking at this game from the standpoint of finding new players. It's easy. There's so many people out there who are dying to try Daggerheart, dying to play Daggerheart, in major cities and online. So if you want to play this game, that absolutely is something that's a big win for it. It is a harder thing sometimes when we look at some of these games that we love, and the reality of finding players for them is difficult. You've got smaller audiences that are not so keen in trying new systems and so on and so forth, so having a larger audience is a big win. Daggerheart, of course, comes off the back of their previous game, Candela Obscura, which was not so well received. We will be talking later date about Candela Obscura and all of our thoughts on it, but it is fair to say that Daggerheart came off the back of it with some concerns raised, and I will be first to say I think those concerns have been met. I think Daggerheart is a very well designed game. It is rules medium with a heavy focus on roleplay and narrative, which already is scratching that Badger Tales itch that we like so much. Huge essences of the way this game is designed is to give you the reins, you the control to make of it what you want. In saying that, there are some flaws that come through. It seems both under and over-designed in spots, giving you massive amounts of freedom and strange hyper-restriction in other areas that leads to a odd tug-of-war. And that tug-of-war weirdly feels baked into Daggerheart's nature. See, Daggerheart is not a D20 system. In fact, it's a D12 system, using one D12 that you mark as your hope dice and one which is your fear dice. You then roll these together, add that number together, and end up with your final result. What's more, though, you make note of which rolled higher, your hope or your fear, because this is also going to impact the outcome of your result. If you roll high and succeed with hope, fantastic, you pull off what you're trying to do, you do it well, and you earn a hope token. If you succeed with fear, you pull off what you're trying to do, but you give the GM a fear token and they take control of the scene, getting to act with their monsters, make something bad happen to you, and so on and so forth. This then also matches into failing. If you fail with fear, it goes badly and you give the spotlight to the GM, and if you fail with hope, things go badly, but you retain some control as the movement of actions continues towards your direction. This also bleeds over to the combat, which when we get to it, has that tug-of-war sort of element of pulling between you and the GM, and immediately off the bat, I can say this is a game which, if you approach it in a mindset where you're against your storyteller, your game master, you'll find it frustrating. In this game, the storyteller is facilitating the story, but they are also actively playing elements against you, and sometimes that can feel unfair or twisted, and it's important to sort of play this game with people who understand that it is not as gamified as something as D&D. The other thing we have to bring up is that we will be conducting this review and referring a lot of times to Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I don't particularly like that. I believe that a game should absolutely stand on its own feet and not be based entirely on comparisons. However, it would be disingenuous for me to continue to talk about Daggerheart without the looming shadow of D&D behind it. Like it as much as we want or not, these three games are all contesting for that spot of being the mainstay fantasy game. The game that everyone goes to play fantasy games because, let's face it, it's what most people want to try. And with that comes that understanding that they are all jockeying against each other. I believe each of these games can sit together and have their own merits that fit depending on the kind of storyteller and game master you are. It's about finding that nugget of what works for you. And this kind of leads me into my next point, which is that I believe that Daggerheart is a far superior game to Dungeons and Dragons for beginners. And we're going to get into that in depth in a minute. But in the shortest way that I can put it, the game champions simplicity. And that comes through in all of its elements that allow players to do what they want to do. Now, is it perfect for new-time GMs? That's a different question. But it is definitely a more accessible, forgiving, and friendly game to new players who are looking to try something on the edge of role-playing. As I was saying before, Daggerheart has been created by the team at Darrington Press, including Matthew Mercer, Spencer Stark, the creator of Alice is Missing, phenomenal text-based intrigue game that you play with your friends entirely on your phones, and recently the joining members of Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins, making this a behemoth moving forward. And a lot about what we're going to be talking today with Daggerheart is its potential moving forward. My sort of go-to with this game is that it is brilliant for homebrewers and people who are looking to do something more narrative and storytelling based, but it is also a game that has so much potential, and I am waiting to see if that potential emerges. On the horizon, we have the new Hope and Fear book, which is promising to add a whole bunch of new classes, heritages, and other little additions to the game, as well as give us an indication of where this game is going. I am very excited for that, and I'm very interested to see where it does go, because it could become something really, really special. So, now, what do you get when you order Daggerheart? Well, you will always get this very fine Daggerheart book that has all of the rules, all of the bits and pieces you need, both for players and GMs. This also has all of your adversaries, monsters, guides, settings, and things like that, all in one nicely contained book. You will also get this very fine card box that comes with all of your cards that you need to play Daggerheart, and mine have become jostled in the muss, but this is where all of your cards will be stored. We have put ours into lovely little fine sleeves, so they are now sliding all over the place, but you get the picture. It's a beautiful box that contains all of your cards in it. You can buy the cards separate without the box, and you can buy just the card sets for your individual players, but that is the general outline of what you get. What you'll probably need to buy is a way of tracking the Hope and Fear tokens, which is a mechanic core to Daggerheart's system. The players in Daggerheart earn hope, which they can use to spend on their abilities, to work in team attacks and such things, and all kinds of things like that. Whereas the GM will earn fear, which they can use to cause bad things to happen to the players. They can spend on counter moves and so on and so forth. We went and bought these little coins, which we found on Amazon, which we really like. They're nice and tactile. You've got a really good feeling to spending them when you're like, oh, I would like to attack with this spell ability. It's also very good for the GM because you can see the GM's pile of coins beginning to gather in front of them as they begin to prepare for a dastardly move where they spend a number of coins all one after the other and do some real devious moves. So I like that a lot. The book itself looks fantastic. It is gorgeous from every page, dripping with artwork that just longs to be looked at. You can spend ages just leafing through this and taking in some of the brilliant art that is in here. The art seems to as well sort of like very casually slide into the context of the page, making it still readable but enjoyable, and that's big win for me in that side. It's a very readable book, which sounds not like a compliment, but it is. It's well laid out and easily accessible with good index, good placements of the rules so that everything you need to find is quick and easy to do. I've also seen some strange complaints recently bobbing around on the internet, sort of saying that the Daggerheart tone is off, that there's some people who find it to be too over-the-top, high fantasy, not gritty enough, that kind of thing, which is odd to me. I get there's a cartoony aspect to the artwork, but at its core, this is a TTRPG. You can roleplay and make this what you want. There's no one telling you that you have to run the game and make people visualize this cartoony kind of artwork, and there's a lot of grit in here, so I will kit back on that. In fact, the book goes to great lengths to give you different frames that show different fantasy settings that are darker. The Age of Umbra, for example, is proper dark From Software style horror, and it just seems like a sort of a non-argument to me. So I'm not sure where that one comes from. But if you're concerned that Daggerheart is too childlike and cartoony, I can assure you that is not true. That is not the case. If you do not believe me, then 1 second, I'll find it right now. Just look at this page covering tier 3 adversaries and demons of all sort. God, they're terrifying. They're grim. Love them. Plenty of things here that are dripping with malice and darkness. So I'm not... I don't understand where that argument has come from. As for its core systems, Daggerheart is a bit of a mishmash. So we talked about the duality dice system and the spending of coins, but there's a lot of systems like these two that you may recognize from other games. Monty Cook's Cypher system and the Genesis system appear in systems like this. And we also see sort of a feeling of flow that relates very closely to Blades in the Dark. Daggerheart wears these systems very proudly on its sleeves. It knows that it drew these influences, but it's very odd to sort of feel this dynamic where you're kind of playing the best bits of other games smushed together. And it works. It works very well. It never feels wrong. There's also a weird deja vu when you read this book, as you come across a lot of rulings that you look at and you're like, that's a very popular, good homebrew ruling that people use for D&D. The death mechanic, which we're going to talk about when we get to our combat section, is a fantastic mechanic that I have used in my D&D campaign for years, and it's fantastic to see it in a book and go, oh, hello, old friend, how are you? It's just great stuff that you're going, they've listened and they've understood what players are looking for, which is agency and control and making each moment matter. Nobody wants in D&D those moments when you're stuck turn after turn as your death saves go down and you can't do anything and you're waiting for someone to throw you a healing point or something so you can get back up again. That destroys all control of your character, and when they do die by a bad roll, it just feels... There's a lot of things that Daggerheart does to get rid of that feeling and give people more agency to choose the moments and make the story they want to make. Going back to what I said earlier about this game being more accessible for players who are new players and maybe still having a little bit of GM strain, I think that's a complicated one. If we examine the Daggerheart book, and I'm going to put some little sheets on there for you now so you can look at the sheets. The sheets are a great example of how this philosophy works. When you get a Daggerheart sheet, it has almost everything you need on it to do your character creation right then and there. In fact, there's very little swiping between pages to find little bits that you need. No, it's all there to be taken and dropped into the slots that it needs to go. There are some mechanics that are a bit more foreign to people, but they're quite simple to explain once you get going. The thresholds and armor mechanics, for example, if the GM knows what they're doing, can guide players through that very simply. And this is one of those games that if the GM knows what they're doing, that early starting strain disappears. It's one of the things that it does significantly better than D&D. I've got players going on Daggerheart within 10 minutes, very quickly dropping in the rules, giving them their sheets, and just starting the game and watching it flow. It works much, much, much smoother. Where that falters is the GM has to know what they're doing, and that's possibly where you see some of that maybe higher expectation on GM strain appearing. I don't think that that's fully fair, because the reality is we're still looking at with the comparison to D&D. So there is a higher GM strain if you haven't played this game as much, which is understandable. If you come into this and you give it the time, you will be ready for it and you will understand it, and the GM strain disappears. But of course, if you're coming into it with a DM brain, if you're coming into it with a Dungeons and Dragons brain and you're preset on rules, you might find it a little bit difficult to come over some of the little clunky bits that get you going. When it comes to that character creation point, it's very good at giving players a lot of room to make the kind of character they want to make. In Daggerheart, you build your character based on your stats, your heritage, which is made up of your background and your ancestry, which kind of fills in for your species and your background in D&D, and finally you pick your class, a lot like D&D. As we said before, that then is pulled together from a number of cards. Your cards will have all of your abilities on them, which you're able to draw from immediately, such as Get Back Up here, which allows me to take a severe damage down one level, and so on and so forth. You also will have all of your various subclasses and stuff identified and shown in your cards. This makes it great as well for new players who want to sit with their deck and can just leaf through it whilst the GM is talking, just sort of getting a grip of what it is they can do and have it all very easily accessible. The amount of times playing D&D where people have struggled on D&D Beyond to swipe through, not know where something is, having this all directly in front of you and accessible definitely adds a level of definitely adds a level of ease to play these things. I can go, oh, what am I, Slyborn? Oh, I'm Slyborn. Here's all my information about being Slyborn right here on one card in barely 2 sentences. And that's a core aspect of the game philosophy that comes through. Everything is simple. And if I'm a new player and want to make my character quickly, well, it's dead easy. I've got my character sheet, which already fills in the best abilities to choose, offers me the best weapons, and sets aside my armor values and thresholds. All I need to do then is choose that I want to be a fawn, which has all of my abilities on it, my Caprine leap and my kick. I can put on then my loreborn. I come from a society built on lore and keeping knowledge, and I also want to be a warrior who's call of the brave, and I have my specific abilities connected to my specialization there. And finally, after that, I just choose my starting abilities, which come from the bone and blade domains. And I've got there, right at my fingertips, a wicked little maneuverable fawn who can leap into combat, take damage, do great big whirl attacks and leap straight out again and dodge attacks as they come upon him, which is awesome. It's fantastic to have that right there. When I talk about that simplicity of the cards, that's something that really comes through, and it helps a lot with newer players. If I look at Qatari, for example, an ancestry that allows me to play as a catfolk style thing, the Qatari has 2 abilities. Feline Instincts. When you make an agility roll, you can spend 2 hope to re-roll your hope dice. And Retracting Claws. Make an agility roll to scratch a target within melee range, and on a success, they become temporarily vulnerable. Those are just 2 sentences, and yet I feel the capacity now to roleplay and twist those whatever way I want. I can make those, I could quite easily homebrew this into a lupine race or a weasel folk race, and there would be very little stopping me. There's no massive wall of text that tells me what a Qatari must be and commanding me to turn the Qatari culturally into something. I have all the free reign to make it what I want. And that's really exciting. So too does that emerge in the communities. If I look at something like Slyborn, the ability I get is only 1. But it comes through that I have advantage on rolls to negotiate with criminals, detect lies, or find safe places to hide. Same again, I can twist this any way I want. Maybe I was a gambler, maybe I was a thief, maybe I was a con man who was pretending to be a magician and using real magic to subvert and outmaneuver the people that were my hits, or whatever you call it. There is so much room in this to make your character your own, which I love. There's also so much room on the sheet to facilitate you adding little bits and pieces, and though it might feel like it's a little bit constrained in terms of the fact that you don't roll for your abilities, something sad, which obviously can make for quite exciting games in D&D where you roll for your character and you can end up with something awesome or something negative. Daggerheart doesn't quite give you that freedom. You're almost always going to be capable, which is good, but it'd be nice to have the option to be able to make yourself worse, if that makes sense. But it's all really cool to have every bit of information you need on the sheet right there and accessible. In fact, between your sheet and your cards, it feels like every bit of information you need is there, and that's what I talk about when I say it's good for new players. There's just so much that is right at your fingertips without having to worry and desperately pore through the book. This extends even to the leveling up system, which is integrated into your sheet, with you simply ticking off things as you choose them, as you level up, inputting those into your sheet and seeing how you've progressed over time. Massive win for me, and definitely a big improvement. You can imagine then my disappointment where we come across the largest failing in Daggerheart, And that, for me, is one of the most important ones. And it breaks my heart to say it. God damn, what were they thinking with the class system? Ooh, it starts off strong with a core that is built on a very unique system. Rather than a class simply being a class on its own, the classes are made up of 2 domains, the domains being the card packs that you draw your abilities from. All of these domains fit into a cunningly drawn little circle, with each domain overlapping and creating a class between them. So, you want to play a druid, well, that's sage and arcane. You end up with something right in between the middle of those, getting close to the druid's ability to control nature and its ability to control magic at its core. You want to play a ranger, well, one slot over we get sage and bone, the ability to control your body and be a weapon through using your own physicality, which bonds well with the ranger and its abilities. And when this works, it's great. You have some really successful ones, such as the ranger, the warrior, which you then have bone and blade, works great together. Guardian, valor and blade, you're good with a sword, but you're also good at defending people and taking hits. And seraph, where you get splendor and valor, defending people but also healing magic. These combinations work great together and make classes that feel very unique. It also gives you more room and more feeling of making your own character feel more separate from everyone else. Because if you both play a warrior, well, you could go a warrior heavily down the bone route, while someone else goes a warrior down the blade route, getting very different abilities whilst playing the same class. However, this really starts to fall apart if you look at it too long. Those ones that work really well on one end start getting crowded and messy on the other side, where you end up with a number of domains that smash into it together with a natural mixing that makes for something that, whilst is a cool class, is not the staples that most people are looking for. The biggest victim of this is the rogue. The Daggerheart rogue is made from a combination of midnight, the art of shadow magic, mystery, and shadow weapon attacks, and grace, the domain of charm and charisma and convincing. And you can begin to see why that doesn't work. This is not the rogue we know and love. This is more akin to a arcane trickster or a sort of magical criminal style thing, which is awesome. I love that. I really want to play that. But it's not a rogue. And what's more, it constrains me down a route, meaning that if I want to play my Ezio Auditore styled finesse assassin, I don't feel like that here. In fact, I have to take magic. I cannot play a non-magical rogue. All of the abilities, both in Grace and Midnight, end up going down a magical route, and there's only so far you can homebrew them before they eventually run out. What I mean by this, well, you can have Hail of Blades. That's great. Instead of having that being shadow blades, which I throw at people, I have a brace of knives that I flick. But eventually, we get down the line where the choices between being heavily charismatic and heavily shadow-based end up with me summoning a shadow beast and more abilities like this, which just doesn't feel roguelike. Other classes also suffer from this, feeling hyper-focused in a way that just denies the heart of what they should be. In my opinion, when you look at a class should be set by a single standing point. That point is what the class is based on. Everything else within the class should stem from that point. For example, we look at the barbarian. In my mind, the barbarian should be built on the principle of rage. That is the totem that makes a barbarian a barbarian. You should be allowed to play a weak barbarian, someone who is more dexterous than strong. And that is something you can do in D&D. It's harder, but you can do it. It is one of the biggest flaws for me that this system tries to constrain you and push you towards their definition of what each of these classes are, which just breaks at my heart, because this is a game that is so close to giving you the reins, to making it your own, and they have faltered here really quite severely. If I look at another example that I want to show you, we look at the Seraph, this paladin-esque character class that's built on holy healing power and defensive-based capabilities. That's not too bad. That's pretty accurate to something that you'd expect to see from a paladin-style thing. However, when we look at its specializations, its two subclasses, for example, we see abilities connected to two options. You can either have wings that come out your back, or a returning weapon. I don't want either of those at all. And now, to play a seraph, it feels like I'm going, hey, I've got this idea for this dwarven cleric who's traveling the land with a chicken that he believes is his reincarnated god. No, you can't do that. No. But what about, no, you can't do that. In fact, if I want to play that, I have to basically build a warrior and then later down the line subclass into seraph and hopefully end up with something that feels right, but doesn't. I don't know. It's one of these things where I just don't know what they were thinking, and it's so sad to me because there's so much capacity for greatness here. They've just fallen short of the mark. Now, is it all bad? No. There's a lot of really cool abilities here. There's a lot of abilities that encourage roleplay over combat, which is delightful. It's great, for example, to see abilities that are based on encouraging your friends, abilities that are based on allowing you to have more criminal contacts, and so on and so forth. That stuff's fantastic, as well as the abilities that are combat dominating, that allow you to do more damage to areas, to get back up and stand when continue to fight. All of these are interesting, well done, and brought together good. There's a lot of stuff to like here, and I do like it. There's a lot of stuff to like here, and I do feel that maybe I'm getting too negative on this. I mean, in a lot of ways, there's freedom. I was talking about the Guardian before. If I wanted to play in D&D more of a hoplite character, it becomes more difficult. I have to move down a certain path, but role-playing a Guardian, which sort of fits both into a paladin and a barbarian style thing, it's easier for me to make something like a hoplite there, and that's cool. But what about the people who don't want to play that and want to play other things? It can get a little messy. Now, they are trying to rectify this. They do have online a platform called The Void, which is where they're publishing all of their playtest materials, such as new classes and so on and so forth. And this is good. We see on The Void that they have an assassin class, closer to the typical assassin you'd expect to see normal rogue filling, so poison abilities, assassination abilities, and overlapping shadow and blade, which becomes more of your typical rogue. However, at the baseline, though that is cool, it's sad that what that leaves us with is a core group of classes that are missing some of the main staples you'd expect to see. With no mainstay rogue, no warlock class, and no monk class, all of which of these being held in the Void, it's leaves you kind of feeling like you're missing something, like a core part of that delicious dinner that you love so well is just on the side. And we don't know how much this is going to change and develop with the coming years. One of the positive things is with the coming out of the Hope and Fear book is that all of these classes will be integrated, but that comes with another level of fear of, will they then be removed from the Void? And if they are, that means now those classes are gone unless you want to pay that extra price for Hope and Fear, which leaves a sour taste in the mouth. Those classes are a core part of any typical fantasy experience. People want to play as the rogue. That is a core class. To have it gone is strange and devoid in a way that definitely leaves you wanting more. And that hyper freedom and restriction comes through again when we look at some other things in the book, and it's heartbreaking when it turns up. But if we turn over to the page on weapons, which at first I loved, you've got all of this full freedom with weapons having little more than a word connected to them, giving full freedom to make it what you want. Broadsword, for example, the entry for broadsword just says name, broadsword, ability connected, agility, range, melee, damage, a d6 physical, burden, one-handed, and feature reliable, giving a +1 to attack rolls. I can make that broadsword whatever I want. I could make it a more curved blade. I could make it something else. This comes towards Things like more extreme things like hallowed axe, arcane gauntlets, glowing rings, hand runes. What these are up to you. Your hand runes could be a number of runes that are blazed, tattooed into the palm of your hand. They could be ancient Nordic runes that you roll when you fight. That freedom is really in your hands, and that's awesome to see. And yet there's some elements that just baffle me. For example, if we look at the rapier is connected to the ability of presence, which is your charisma in this game. So all of your rapier attacks are done by your charisma and charm, and I understand why they've done this. They want to give you the power to play your swashbuckling fencer, to have that feeling of, oh, I want to play a rogue. Well, maybe I get a rapier and I'm going to be just as fighty as a fighter. I'm going to be able to get into the exchanges and battle around, and that's awesome. I really like that. Except it's not an option. It states that it's the presence role. So if I want to play a musketeer who's not charismatic, I'm suddenly not allowed to. In fact, the weapon seems to now define my character. In order to use a saber or a cutlass, I also am expected to be charming and charismatic. Why can't I play an ugly, down on his luck, battered pirate who's a bit of an asshole? Nope. You have to be charming and you have to have people like you. And I don't like that. And yes, of course, I can twist it, I can change it, I can say, like with that broadsword, this broadsword's a cutlass, but that just feels lesser. I want to be able to be that down on his luck fencer rather than the charming one. And having to have a conversation with my GM about that beforehand takes away from it somewhat. And there's a lot of players who won't talk to their GM, who will get to that point and go, oh. And that's sad. It's sad that they are not doing that. In my mind, the better way to have done that mechanic was in the classes like Rogue, or maybe even a Swashbuckler style class, if they're coming up with something like that, giving the ability to use a rapier as presence instead of agility. That makes that class feel unique, makes it feel more special, and gives you the freedom to be that. Or have it as a core thing that every class that chooses a weapon can change the ability associated to use it. Something like that might have made it feel a bit more freeing in my mind. And then comes the worst of all. The spear. My boy. The spear, my favourite, has been reduced. Well, first of all, great, fantastic. It's finesse. I love that. That's wonderful. Very close range, so you got some distant art. That's also good. Down to 1d10 and 12. Oh, 0.2 physical. That's good. That's a bit more ability than I would have given it. And then it's got two-handed quality. Since when are spears exclusively two-handed weapons? Now my hoplite character I want to play is no longer feasible. What's more, I'm hit with the cumbersome trait, which means that I have a -1 to all my finesse checks when I'm using this weapon. Why would I use it? It's much better in my mind where they've already got an inbuilt ability, they've already got an inbuilt system based on repairing armor. Why not have the spear have an ability that whenever it does a critical hit, it snaps and breaks, and you have to switch to a secondary weapon, and then when it comes to your downtime, you can use one of your armor slot repairs to repair your spear. That seems fair to me. And that is in my mind, one of the most heartbreaking parts of Daggerheart. Though it gets close to that greatness, it really lets down on the character creation. Now, does it bury it entirely? Absolutely not. There is much more to like and enjoy in this game. I'm going to talk through that now at the rules table. So if you'd like to come with me, we'll get straight to that. So you've built your character. You've got yourself ready to go, and you sit down for a game of Daggerheart. What does that look like? Well, we talked about it a bit before, but you'll be using your 2 dice, your cards, and your spending of the hope and fear system in order to have this whole game to come together. The game operates without any turn order whatsoever. As a player, you simply say what you want to do, and the GM lets you do it. There is the caveat, which we talked about before. Anytime you roll with fear or you fail at an action, the GM seizes the spotlight, takes control and gets to do what they want to do. And they can do what they want to do immediately once they get the spotlight, or they can spend fear tokens to influence, activate monsters, cause bad things to happen, and so on and so forth. It's this which generates our tug-of-war mechanic, where you're seeing how much you can get away with. Do you want to run that extra 30 foot of distance to get into the action? But the risk of knowing if you fail, the GM gets control and they can hit you back. And as you're watching, their little pile is growing larger and larger, and suddenly they go on a spending spree, and they spend it all at once, activating multiple monsters, causing a cascading barrage of attacks, and you are severely knocked back. That is where the fun of Daggerheart lies, and I have to say, I adore it. The combat mechanics is where this game really finds its flow, and it's not just the combat. This game slips that mechanic into both combat and social aspects, allowing you to cause stress damage to people through social interactions, have them do the same back to you, and all having it operate on this very gentle system of feeling ebb and flow. What's more, this feels very natural for a storytelling-focused game. A GM can let that pile grow and use it when they feel a story mode happen. So they want to hit hard, they want that impact to that moment. If you're a good storyteller and you can feel that moment coming, this game gives you the tools to take advantage of it. What's more, as players find their own hope growing, they can spend it themselves to influence bigger attacks and bigger moves. For example, if you happen to like another character in the game, you can trigger a team attack, spending 3 hope to activate an attack where you both attack together, pull off an awesome move, and do maximum amount of damage. And that can really be delicious. It's wonderful to see these little mechanics come together to facilitate telling the story rather than over-structure it. What can feel quite annoying for people with Dungeons & Dragons is the same place a lot of us have all been, where you're sitting and waiting for your turn as it goes round and round, and you're just getting bored as you've planned your thing, gets right to your turn, you play your action, done, the next guy doesn't know how to do their turn. That can be frustrating, and it can also act as a disengagement point for newer players. They don't want to sit for half the game just looking at their sheet. They want to be engaged in the fight. They want a give and flow, and that is much more palpable here. You have monsters that the second after you strike them, the GM spends a 3 and immediately hits you straight back. What's more, he spends another fear and he goes after you, trying to push you towards the edge of the cliffside. That feels much more like a fight, and everyone, because they are also in it, because there's no turn order, they can react and let themselves fall back as you would in a normal fight, feeling the realism and where the story moments happen. That's awesome, and I have to say, when Daggerheart comes together like that, it's sublime. What's more, this is when the cards and the hope really comes in and you get that lovely tactile feeling. Daggerheart is definitely a much better game to play in person. Online, it loses somewhat of it, and that's because it's so delightful to have these cards in your hands, to be leafing through them and to go, actually, I think I'm going to play I'm Your Shield. I'm going to deploy this like a sneaky little Yu-Gi-Oh player, show it to the GM and show off as I leap in front of take the damage instead. As well, it's so good when you have these little coins or whatever it is you use to spend, be them coins, be them little tokens and so on and so forth. It's really lovely to play with them and to hand them off and spend them. That feels deliciously engaging and immersive. Now, this can become a little bit overwhelming. I don't know if you can see here, but this table has become quite crowded. It reaches a point when you've got your coins, or whatever you're using for your hope tokens and fear tokens, your dice, your cards, your sheets, your tokens, maps, and all that stuff, and suddenly it becomes a bit bitty. It's just a bit much. There's too much there to manage and hold on to, and it gets really messy when you end the session or start a new one. You see, it's all well and good to get these cards out, draw these cards, and play them when you're running in a game. The problem is, though, is that these lovely, pretty cards have probably only been bought by the GM. And if you're anything like me, you don't want players going home with these. because you've spent a bit of money on them and things get lost. What that means, though, is at the end of every session, you have to gather all of these back up again, and at the beginning of the next session, reissue them. Which means things get a little bit messy. You see, there's a lot of times we've ran this where people have forgotten what they had, have misremembered, or not written it down, and therefore have to redraw and just draw from memory what they had on their sheet. Which gets messier the higher levels you are and the more abilities you have. That's fine, you can make allowances for it. We ended up doing a lot of time where we just took a picture of the top of the map. But it does leave you with a point where you spend at least the first 5-10 minutes of every game resorting things out, which is alright. If you're good friends with everyone, then you just chat whilst you're doing this. It's just something to bear in mind that it's a little bit finicky. And I would say it's slightly different for us. If you're playing one Daggerheart campaign, probably no bother. You guys all remember and you keep on top of it. If you're like us and you're running 4 or 5 a week, it becomes a lot. Added to this finickiness, there's a slight icky sensation, a monetization element that leaves a sour taste in the back of the throat. You see, you can already see the elements of payment structure coming into this. Well, you want more cards. When the new book comes out, you're going to have to pay for more cards. You want to, you lost some of your cards, you're going to have to pay to get replacement cards. And if you're a player, like you said, you probably don't want to keep giving back your cards. You want to buy your own ones, so you buy your own ones. And then it goes on and on. Now you've got to buy some tokens. And of course, there's not long before they'll be coming out with official tokens. I believe they're already coming out with token trackers for the GM. So it's not essential, but you can start to see the gentle creeping in of methods of monetization, and they do leave you a little bit on the back foot. Overall, though, it doesn't feel invasive, and they have built in a lot of ways to sort of go without that. You can print the cards for free directly from your PDF or from the book. You also can use whatever you want for hope tokens, and they even have a little helpful hope tracker on the sheet that you can mark off if you want to do it that way. So none of this stuff is essential, and none of this stuff is forcing you to buy stuff, but it definitely feels a little bit icky. When the game is playing, though, all of that disappears. These elements all come together really nicely, and you never feel like there's too much. That moment-to-moment gameplay feels so good with the simplicity. When you have all of your abilities explained with one sentence only, it makes it really quick for people to do their turns, complete their action, and immediately go on to the next person. It gives this dynamic element to the battles that is really enjoyable. This combat is paired with some of those lovely rules we talked about earlier that have come from various different games. That death mechanic I talked about earlier is fantastic. In Daggerheart, when you go to 0 hit points, you don't die or go into an unconscious state where you're waiting turn by turn to die or not die as other people get you up. No, you're given 3 options, and they are fantastic. The first one is you just go unconscious. Everyone else continues on without you. Therefore, you have a safe way of keeping your character safe if you don't want to die. Second option, you can go out in a blaze of glory, choosing death but succeeding in what you do in the process. This comes in an epic combination of doing a massive critical hit or succeeding in a spell check. Whatever it is you want to do, you do it, and you do it brilliantly well, giving your character one last send-off as they go out. The final one is you can absolutely put your fate in the hands of the dice and roll your duality dice. And if it rolls higher with hope, you get back up. And if it rolls higher with fear, you die. No, nothing, just dead. And I love that. It is so good to give the agency to the player to go, hey, I feel like this is an epic moment where I could die. Or this is a moment where I want to go out in a blaze of glory. I want to get that one scar on the enemy so I know that he can bleed and show my friends before I die. That is awesome for storytelling. And it makes the encounters feel so much more engaging than a lot of other TTRPGs. I have had more character deaths in Daggerheart than I have had in the same time playing D&D, and none of them have ever felt unearned. There's never been a point where we've had in D&D a character slowly bleeding out in the background and passing away without any final moment. No, here each moment matters, and that's really, really unique. It's also really cool for the GM to have abilities where they can put down countdowns for bad things happening. Hey, this place is falling down around you. I'm going to put down a countdown for 6. And every success you have towards that's going to put the countdown back up again, and every failure will make it go down further as you try to get out of here as the place falls down around you. Intuitive, reactive gaming that gives a ticking clock for the players to fight back against as everything comes tumbling down around them. The combat is supplemented by a different take on hit points and damage than typical TTRPGs. Instead of having a very large health pool, you have a small health pool that's only 6 or sometimes 7 dots high. This can go up as you level up. Whenever you take damage, it is classified between a minor, major, or severe range, wherever it's falling upon this, either doing 3 points of damage, 2 points of damage, or 1 point of damage. This means that every point of damage matters. You get knocked back, and that dwindling health pool disappears quite fast. The way you beat it, you have armor that you spend reducing those hit dice damages as you manage to fend off with the armor, which again gives this really impactful feeling of your kit actually mattering. When your plate mail takes a hit, you can roleplay it breaking off and falling to the ground as you take the damage as you keep fighting, or your shield shattering under the impact. You then use your downtime to repair it, giving this feeling of impact to the situations where you don't just take heavy wounds and get back up again, you feel like the wounds matter. On top of this, you end up juggling your health, your stress, and your hope, with your stress acting as a resource for abilities, but also, once it's dwindled, making you vulnerable to taking massive hits. There's one element here that I'm not so sure of, and it's just a little odd one. Not a game changer, just a little bit odd. But Daggerheart has very few status effects, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. In one way, it really streamlines things. Instead of having stunned, blinded, paralyzed, all these various other things, you simply have 3. You have hidden, which means you're hidden. You have restrained, which means you can't move until it's cleared. And you have vulnerable, which covers everything else and is up to your own discretion to make up on the spot. And on one hand, I think that's awesome. On the other hand, if you're not a creative storyteller or a creative player, it can make a lot of the abilities feel quite samey. If you throw ice at someone and it's not doing anything different to throwing fire at them, what's the point of doing either? I will say we didn't really come across that problem. Most of the abilities have enough feeling in them to give them uniqueness, and they do their own things as well as causing a problem, such as hitting stress, hit points, or armor, so that the abilities generally do feel unique. It's just, after a long time of playing, it can pull back a little bit. Now, this armor and hit point effect is very cool, and I like it a lot. It does have one major drawback, and it's one that you have to be a good storyteller to get around. So, with that system, you may have noticed that both the players and the monsters are almost always, unless they have ability around it, restricted to a maximum damage of 3 hit points. Now, almost all standard adversaries in the book have at least 6 hit points. You have multiple creatures like hordes and minions that take more damage and take less damage and be taken out instantly. But it does feel strange that you can pull off an epic attack, a brilliant teamworking moment, and the max damage you end up hitting with is still 3. And that's lessening to some moments. There is a homebrew rule that allows you to, if you double the severe threshold, to do 4 points of damage, but this still means that even doubling a threshold on an enemy that's just a standard enemy, you still can't kill it with 1 hit. But that's kind of a a give and take one. It's a tough one because it comes back in both ways. This is a similar one that I'm not sure how I feel about. On the one hand, it's great to have a more give and take on that combat with the hit points really mattering, and when you land a severe hit, properly damaging the dragon. But at the same time, when it comes to those standard fights, it feels like it can take away somewhat with that impact. Now, you can mitigate this, and it is very easy to do. You just have to make good use of Daggerheart's adversary system. Now, this is one of the things that I think is really, really cool about this book. Each of the adversaries fits into their own category, with the categories ranging from standards, typical enemies, minions, groups of enemies, right up to solos, single enemies that can face a whole party just by themselves. Their abilities as well correspond to this, allowing for better spending of fear and so on. The leader class can spend fear to activate whole groups of people and cause mass attacks, or even when the spotlight falls on them, just tell people to do things, really making them feel unique. This means each of the fights you come across do feel really engaging. You have to take note of what each enemy is doing and pay attention, for they may get the better of you. Support classes can buff up and make enemies fight harder and do more damage, whilst brutes take a ton of damage and stand in the way of their friends to battle through. You also have minions, which are the heart of getting rid of the problem I talked about earlier. Minions and hordes are groups of enemies that can be taken out with a single roll. The way this works is you roll the dice, tally up your damage, and if it beats the threshold on the minion, it automatically kills it, and for every additional extra amount of damage you did on top, you kill an additional minion. This means you can have epic scenes where your dwarf guardian leaps onto the opponent pirate ship and makes an attack against a group of minions, and with his 2-axe, cuts one down through the knee, takes the other through the cheek, and spins and throws his axe as it embeds into another's forehead, all done with one action, really making you feel like a badass, and not taking too much away from the GM, who's only lost a couple of minions. That responsive element is so much fun, and it makes it feel like every action you do matters. If you want to play and storytelling this well, I very much encourage you, feel out those different categories and use them right. If you put your players up against a group of standard enemies, it's going to feel very standard. Throw in a bruiser to take some of the hits, a support who's going to fire up their enemies from afar, and a ranged who can do more damage from further away. All of these things, when they come together, make the combat just so juicy, and that is something that I have to say this game dominates D&D on. The combat is fantastic. This also works outside of combat with multiple character sheets for adversaries that are environments. You can put your players up against a waterfall that has usable abilities and stats that work against the players, allowing them to quite literally battle the environment as they try to get through it, making these travelling and environmental problems in their way feel more impactful. Everything in this book is designed to facilitate this kind of storytelling, and it does it phenomenally well. And I think that's where I sit with Daggerheart. When I look at this, I just can't help but feel a joy about it. It brings me back more and more and more, and I'm finding myself playing it more than I'm playing D&D. That dynamic combat is so enjoyable, and it's such a breath of fresh air if you've played D&D all your life, that it has me questioning some of my allegiances to old D&D. I mean, I've been playing that game for 10 years. It's a core part of my identity and my life. My God, when the pieces fall into place, when this game gets running, it's so much more story-driven, and it is visually so much more engaging, that it just isn't a comparison. Now, there are not many adversaries in this book, but that is no surprise, seeing as they've srammed in all the DM advice, the player info, and the monsters into one. I suspect we'll see a lot more monsters coming out very, very soon, so I wouldn't worry about that. But yes, be aware the monsters in here are limited. They are very easy to homebrew, though. All of the abilities, because they have that adaptive flow, are very easy to just change a little bit. It was super easy for me to turn a bunch of archers into some homebrew archers from my world, or to shift the juvenile flickerfly into a raptor-type creature. All of this stuff, very easy to do. So if you're up for homebrewing, you will have to do a bit of it, but it's very easy with the system in place. On top of all this, the one thing I absolutely adore about Daggerheart is that it does not have one set world. When you play something like D&D, a lot of it is given over to lore that it shoves in your face, sort of demanding that you play by its rules. Now, in reality, I've always ran homebrew. At Badger Tales, we praised homebrew above everything else, so homebrew is at the core of our identity, and that is something Daggerheart is much more amenable to. In fact, when you buy the Daggerheart book, it does not come with one set setting, it comes with 6 beginning ones that fit into its various frames. These frames range from a Monster Hunter Delicious Dungeons style escapade, where you hunt down monsters and have charts to show what food you make them into, right on to the Age of Umbra, a From Software style, dark, gritty, horrendous mess of a world that's full of darkness and corruption, and it's delightful to play. That, for me, is massively appealing. And these frames have been delightfully put together, giving you enough lore and enough information that you feel like you understand the world without overbearing you, giving you the room to fill in the gaps yourself, but also giving you the mechanics you need to make this world feel special. And that is truly unique. I expect to fully see a whole host of homebrew frames coming out very soon, and more of them will rival people's expectations. You can see this homebrew core to it throughout the game, and I've talked about that already through the weapons and stuff like this that has room for you to make them your own, but it even folds into the various ancestries. As you even look at the ancestry page, it gives you whole different drawings of the different ways they could be depicted. When you get to the frames themselves, it tells you, for example, in Age of Umbra, that the Draconia don't stand tall, but instead are hunched over, more lizard-like, that the fairies have been corrupted and twisted. I don't feel held back by it. It's giving you the tools to make them your own. And that would be my main advice to anybody who's looking to run this game. Take the reins and run with it. Wherever the game gives you a railroad, smash that railroad and make your own way, because it wants you to. Sometimes I read this book and it just feels like I've been given a box set to build myself, like one of those little model planes whenever you were a child, except this one comes with extra pieces, and all the pieces go in different places, and hey, you want to build a World War II fighter pilot? Or do you want to build a spaceship? It's all there, and it's all absolutely doable. So I would encourage you, take where it wants you to go, understand the game, learn the game, and then break the rules, because there's so much room to do that with Daggerheart. This is a game built on collaboration. It is a game where your players have much more control of the narrative, their own characters, and their own place in the world, as well as the world itself. They have the impact to make big decisions, and they have the impact to world build with you. My biggest advice for this game, more even than some other games, is to build that communication with your players. Build the story you want to play. If you want to play a more merciless game where the GM is more of an adversary, fighting against you and using those fears for bigger hits, let them communicate that to you and work with them to do that. But find the game that you want to play together, because there's so many ways to do that with Daggerheart. I would also really encourage you to feel the flow between the moments with this game. This game wants to tell a story, and you can do that if you let it. All you have to do is feel those moments whenever you're gathering fear, whenever you see the players are low on hope, and whenever you feel that it's connecting with the story you're building, and take advantage of them. This is a game to let the mechanics work for you, rather than work against you. If you fight them too hard, it will pull out of your grip. But if you hold on to them and just gently allow them to do what they need to do and snap in place whenever you're ready to do something, it all comes together beautifully. And that's where I'm left with Daggerheart, looking at something that has massive potential. This could be my fantasy staple. It could be the fantasy staple going forward, if it continues to innovate, listen, and grow. There's so much that it does right, and that works so well, that it is heartbreaking at the bits that don't. That character creation flaws has left me infuriated more with a game than I've been in a long time. There's not been a game where I've gone to bed going, why'd they do that to the rogue? Why'd they do that to the rogue? Quite like Daggerheart has. And I think it's because it makes me care so much. I want this game to be better and better and better. And it has all the things it needs to become what it could be. It's got fantastic developers, a brilliant media base beneath it in the Critical Role Bastion, and so many other things that are working towards it that it can just seize. Wow. Just have to wait and see. So that's the end of the review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that this review has given you an idea of if Daggerheart is the game for you. It's rules medium, crunchy but not too much, with some great bits of combat and some areas that it's maybe lacking in and needs some work. If you're like us, I think you'll find it very, very, very enjoyable. And if you're looking for something maybe a bit more combat heavy, where the combat's very run by the numbers, it might not be for you. This is more of a game where you feel the combat and you feel the story and have it react to you. And I like that a lot, but it's not for everyone. For more information on Daggerheart, we will be posting videos that go into actual gameplay, showing you a moment-to-moment combat encounter and a social encounter. Hopefully that will be somewhere here, if that gesture didn't give it away. And very soon we'll be putting out a series that runs through exactly some of our tips on how to play this game from a more rules standpoint, guiding you through each of the rules one by one and helping you to get a grasp on running this game properly, along with our tips and guidance along the way. And if you're looking to play Daggerheart or any of the various other systems that we run games all around London and we run games online if you're looking to dip your toe in and test them. We also run very creative, interesting little role-play nights where we introduce different mechanics into events that we run around London. So they're very enjoyable if you're looking for something a little bit out of the ordinary. You can book your sessions at www.badgertales.co.uk. We also post advice for storytelling, voice acting, world building, and everything TTRPGs on our Instagram pages at Badgertail Games. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.